hearing this morning. Good morning, John.
Afternoon, Chris. Afternoon, Sabrina. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's been really busy. So I had a public hearing yesterday afternoon, another one this morning. Just wanted to be able to squeeze this in and then head off to that about 9 o'clock.
So let's
What's
start.
the public day?
Well, yesterday it was about requiring the FAFSA, the financial aid forms, to be completed and submitted by high school students in order to graduate. That was a bill that's been proposed for consideration. And then also today there is a discussion about the Southern High School facilities and being able to utilize tax credits to help prepare the auditorium. So we'll be ready to address, both issues. But one of the things that we will talk about today, facilities for our school or for our school system have really been a challenge because the types of fixes that these buildings need are not really the Band-Aid type of fixes that we have the resources to provide at this moment. The real types of investments we need are the kinds of investments that you would normally go out and issue bonds for so that you could raise the money and pay back those amounts over time. And because the government is so limited in its capacity to borrow to make those kinds of investments, all the major capital improvement projects that we have either have to get funded all at once, within our annual budgets, or they end up getting delayed and deferred. So that's really been the challenge. And so, we welcome creative solutions to try to figure out ways to address some of our key projects. But it's really hard when you think about having to go one project at a time to try to find these solutions when there ought to be a more comprehensive approach, when we look at our government buildings, especially our school buildings. But on the positive side, though, yesterday we did issue a press release because we are so grateful to get some kind of federal assistance when there's no local assistance to support these efforts. And just in this past month, we learned that the U.S. Department of Interior was going to go ahead and fund our requests for basically a school facility master plan to basically update all of the conditions at our school facilities and to really lay out a plan for funding and beginning to rehabilitate, renovate, and modernize our school facilities. That's something that the legislature has requested of the department to do. And, there was a notion that we would be able to outsource that work with funding that was made available, but the funding never came through. So we really do need an update to our plan. And we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers working with the contractor, one of their contractors out of Hawaii. Will be starting that work with us to help us engage stakeholders in this bigger discussion about the school facilities on island, and also I think the target date for completing the plan will be November of next year. So they have 12 months to get through this process. And I guess my message to the senators today is that we have to look at this comprehensively, and we have to look at this from the standpoint of making long-term investments in our children. You've been asking us for a plan. We've never had the funding to do it, but we will have that plan together by next year. And when we have that plan, the big question is, do we have the willingness and ability to support, these needed investments? So basically, that's going to be our testimony today at the public hearing.
Right on.
Yeah, I was looking through the press release. So this initiative it's building upon the review or deferred maintenance review that was conducted, I want to say 7 years ago.
Yeah, and in 2013, the Army Corps of Engineers did a report that identified around $90 million in deferred maintenance. And of course, we had our funding at that time, so we were able to make some of those repairs right away in terms of roof repairs and electrical repairs and just things, across the school system, spreading those resources out. But, these are investments that need to recur. They can't just be one-time investments because, maintenance is required every year. And when we're talking about, repairing a broken pipe, it's one thing. But when you're talking about the need to, retrofit a school that's 50 years old, so that it can handle technology, the electrical load for, what our kids demand today, just upgrading it for today's needs. That's a much bigger investment. So, with $30 million in cuts that we've had to take over the last couple of years, it's not easy to make room for those types of investments that you would normally look for other sources of funding outside your normal operating budget. I like to say it's like buying a house. Nobody expects that you're going to, put the full amount down on your house unless you have those kinds of resources. What you normally do is take a mortgage out so that you can pay it over time and expect that the building is going to last, for that length of time. And our school buildings, we're looking to maintain another 30 years at least, and in some cases even up to 50 years. So these investments that we make are really for the future. We're not doing this with the expectation that it'll be a school for 2 years and then we're going to change, its use. It really is anticipating that public education will be around for the next 30 to 50 years, and we need buildings for our school kids. Who knows? Maybe the future will be all virtual at some point. But for now, we anticipate we need that face-to-face instruction at some point. So. And maybe that's a good segue. I wanted to, because I know the other thing I wanted to obviously talk about is face-to-face instruction. So it's this interesting thing that goes on where, I've tried to do this many times on your show, is just completely clarify, continue to clarify our status at this point. And just yesterday, someone sent me a message that said, hey, this teacher said they heard from you that you're going to open up in January, period. And I said, well, let me clarify. We are looking at January for planning purposes. And if it is safe enough, we are looking at various types of scenarios in which we can welcome our kids back for face-to-face instruction. But January is really just the planning date. It really depends on getting our community back into a situation where it's safe enough to open. And so we continue to use, this dashboard that we put together for our purposes based on the Centers for Disease Control's recommendations. And we do see the numbers improving in terms of the community positivity rate and the number of new cases. At the same time, we're still at a high risk, the high risk part of the spectrum compared to where we ought to be in order to start, opening up schools, even if it's just in a limited fashion. So we've been, we're down to less than probably about a couple of weeks now before we have to make sort of a final recommendation and make a decision about next semester. So our team is really pushing to ensure that everything's ready to go. But we met with the Lieutenant Governor yesterday, and we just really, talked about what this game plan ought to be. The first thing for us is that the governor has to determine for herself, based on the advice of the public health professionals, whether or not she will authorize any reopening of schools. Obviously, when she does, she's going to leave it to the school's private charter or DOE to make a determination about when and how to open. But the first step is that she has to feel comfortable enough based on her public health information to say, okay, we're ready to reopen schools. So we offered to, of course, briefing this Lieutenant Governor and of course the governor as she needs to ensure she has all the information from us as to what our plan is should she decide to open. If she does not decide that we're ready to open, then of course we'll be in status quo, and we will continue to work with our stakeholders to facilitate distance learning and also determine whether, in the near future, face-to-face instruction will be possible, the second semester. But again, it all depends on that call. If she says, well, I'm going to give you the green light so you now can figure out how you want to open and to what extent you want to open, that's where our team's planning comes into play. We're looking, again, what I told the team is, and I'll be direct about this because I have asked the Lieutenant Governor to facilitate a conversation. I'm still trying to understand the whole CAR score approach. I'm not sure, how it aligns with the dashboard that we're using based on the CDC guidance. And so I want to make sure that we don't get into a situation where we are talking to each other, but our numbers, our data, our assessment is clashing, because I think that'll be confusing to the community. Certainly don't want the governor's numbers to say we're safe, and then our numbers are showing us, in this high risk situation without, better explanation. So I know this Friday we'll be sitting down, getting a better understanding of what their numbers represent and how it aligns with our assessment, so that when we do, make a determination, we can bring the public along in that understanding.
Yeah.
So,
John,
if she
John-
gives the green light, our first step is going to be looking at whether we feel comfortable, based on our risk assessment opening. And then based on that risk assessment, we're looking at different scenarios.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be necessarily all at once. Everybody, if we open, everybody opens, we might be looking at a gradual reopening. We've been talking about whether it makes sense to address the needs of special education students first, who seem to be the most in demand for services at the schools, and do that in a very limited fashion, and then into the elementary grades and so forth. So we have a plan in place. 2 weeks will be more finalized, but it really depends on a number of dominoes falling, starting with the governor's decision about whether to open schools at all. And so, we'll continue to work with our partners to do what we need to do. Another big topic is also the contact tracing. So I see, I know Lydian's on hold here, but public health partners, we're working with them to try to have a conversation about ensuring that we can build our contact tracing capacity within GDOE to help partner with public health should we reopen. And, a number of those types of discussions are still ongoing, but we're getting, that plan in place, and we're pretty confident we'll be ready to make a recommendation in 2 weeks.
John,
what that Ms. Gutierrez mentioned when we spoke with her after the Guam Education Board meeting was she was giving a heads up to senators that we're planning on sending over a supplemental budget request. Can you tell us more about the request that's going to be made, or even if you have made it, and is this supplemental budget necessary for the return of face-to-face?
So that's really, that's really going to be the issue. Right now, we're making as many adjustments as possible based on our lower budget, right? So we're trying to ensure that we're paying employees, paying for our key contracts and so forth under these reduced numbers and under the reduced cash flow that we get each week, right? So when the budget was reduced, obviously that reduced the level of cash that we receive each week from DOA. So our financial people are trying to make sure we pay down our priorities first so that everybody gets paid on time. Everybody, the contractors don't have to wait too long. And these are really tight months because some of our funding comes out of tax collections that won't happen until next spring. So those are the real property tax collections. So we're kind of holding, and I think we're holding it down, and we're doing okay. But part of that also is because we're closed. So we do benefit from some of the savings on the utility side and other things that are helping us stay afloat. If we open, that's where we're going to need the supplemental funding to ensure that we have the ability to cover all of our costs, including, again, the increased costs that come with running your facilities on a day-to-day basis. So those will come on the maintenance side. Those may come on the increased services from our contractors that we've decreased because of our closed schools. Those might come on the utility side as we have more people, at the school sites. So I think the discussion I'm having with the board is, we are going to prepare a supplemental budget to try to restore the cuts that were made. But part of it is also going to be based on the decision about whether, we are going to be open up for face-to-face instruction. Because I can see the legislature saying, well, if you're not open, then, aren't you able to make things work? And we'll have to do that analysis. But definitely if face-to-face instruction does return, it's going to put a lot more pressure on us. I think that's where the board is saying, if we have to open up, there are going to be certain areas that we want to make sure we shore up in terms of our finances.
So are we looking at $1 million supplemental budget request or more?
Well, I'm not really sure where we'll end up. I know that we, our reduction this year was about $12 million. Now that we restored some of the funding that was, associated with the JFK refinancing, that was about $2.5 million that came back to DOE. So we have about 12.5 cuts compared to last year. So it'll be within that amount. I'm not sure where the board will end up. But I think if it was to just fully restore our budget from last year, that amount would be about 12.5, at max.
John, I wanted to go back to the car score real quick. Sorry, Bree. And so
Yeah.
you're talking about reconciling the car score, which is GovGuam's metric for measuring how well we're doing with the pandemic, so we can have a very enjoyable Christmas. And then you've got the
Yeah.
CDC, which says stay away from Guam; it's a COVID hotspot. And then you've got Dodea, which is open for business.
Right.
So how do you kind of
Yeah. And I
it's
just,
so many conflicting messages, and then how do you kind of I mean, it kind of sounds like you're going to sit down about this car score, but does this mean GDOE will move from the widely accepted CDC data and
yeah, it's going to
designations?
be, it's going to be difficult. I mean, I'm a big believer that we have to bring all of, as many people in the community along with us in looking at data and understanding what it means. Because I think if we, if I were to talk to our constituents and say, hey, I got all these numbers and I can't explain it to you in a way that you're comfortable with, then I can't really just have them trust me blindly. I don't think that's the right way to go. So I wanted to choose a dashboard that what I felt I could rely on. And I looked at the CDC as the experts and went with their score. Now, that doesn't mean that the CAR score, doesn't align with it. It's just a different way of looking at similar data, and as well as using factors that I don't know are readily available to, the general public. So this whole notion of the rate of spread, I want to understand that so that we can interpret and figure out if our numbers are really similar, in fact, in just representing, different facets of the same problem. So it's really important that we don't go out into the community and say CAR score looks good, DOE dashboard looks bad, and then have us stuck trying to explain that to the public. So I did ask Lieutenant Governor for that assistance, and I think maybe with that conversation we can then say, hey, if the CAR score shows this, and this is what it means for our risk assessment, and be able to explain it to our stakeholders. It's really important that our parents, and again, we're not talking about a community of medical professionals. We're talking about people from all walks of life having to make decisions about their children. We want them to understand, what we understand about the situation. We want to communicate with our parents as best as we can to let them know, what we know, and help them make their decisions. I think the biggest challenge for us, of course, is not simply our parents, because our parents are going to have the opportunity to make choices on behalf of their students, whether they want to come back or whether they want to stay in distance learning. And so we feel really comfortable that when we get to that stage, which is in the next week or so, of having the parents verify, their options for next semester, that they will feel that they have information to allow them to say, hey, I feel like it's okay if they come back, or they feel, hey, it's not safe enough, I'm going to keep my kid home. The ones who, we really are focused on is, our teachers. We want to make sure that our teachers also are comfortable and understand the situation the way we are, explaining it, and how we're approaching the risk in our schools. Because if there is face-to-face instruction, obviously we need teachers there. And, we are going to try to accommodate teachers, for the various situations that I know teachers will have. I mean, some of them are really, really anxious and concerned about returning. Some of them want to return and are feeling comfortable. And we're going to try to accommodate them as much as possible. But as you know, at the end of the day, if our kids want to come to school face to face and we feel we can accommodate them, we're going to need teachers who are going to be there with them. So, it's important that they also are part of that conversation and involved and understand. So that's I think the biggest issue with the CAR score and the DOE dashboard. We just need to make sure it doesn't confuse people about what the situation is and in terms of the community health situation.
Have you had any conversations with Dodea to check their progress and maybe even take some of the things that they're doing to implement when DOE returns to face-to-face?
Yes, we met with the community superintendent, Gail Wiley, last week, as well as Dr. Arrington. I forget his first name, but he's also from PAC West, Dodea, both of whom have a deep involvement in the preparations for the Dodea school opening. So it was a very helpful conversation. I think they felt very good and very positively about how they were able to implement Obviously, they were willing to share with us, some of those first week or two of wrinkles that they had to iron out, and had a lot of helpful suggestions. And they definitely shot over a lot of the information, the underlying information that they were able to put together for their community. So we're looking through all the things that they sent over in terms of their operations, in terms of how they're dealing with certain parts of their reopening, so that we can compare and see what we can do to strengthen our approach. I think a couple of things that they mentioned that really resonated was, number one, it's ensuring that we have what they call COVID-19 teams at every school, who were really designated to continue to monitor, assess, make recommendations to the central team, or to management about how to continue to sustain and improve protective measures at the school level. So we have our safety teams at each school, and I think we can utilize that basis, and and just kind of supplement their role with the COVID-19 related issues that we want them to monitor and track. So that was helpful. They really stressed the role that their public health officials are playing in their strategies. And we did ask Lieutenant Governor that once we get to this decision and we start getting into the harder questions, a lot of people are asking questions now, but I think if the decision is we're going to open face-to-face, I think you're going to get a lot of more pointed, more in detailed questions that we want to make sure our public health professionals are there with us to be able to answer. So we did ask if they could identify someone to participate in our public outreach as we headed into these decisions, and possibly into January's face-to-face, if that occurs. And then they just other measures that we wanted to ask about. The thing that they are doing over there that's different from what we're doing is the plexiglass dividers that they have for every student. So we were interested in that because it's a very expensive, proposition to supply every kid with a portable plexiglass divider. But we learned that part of their decision to do that, which is really not required, but they're doing that because they are in a situation where they're not necessarily able to sustain social distancing in every, in all parts of the facility, including in the classroom. So I think as part of the effort to accommodate that, the inability to do social distancing, those dividers are now put in place, compared to our situation where we are looking at holding down the daily attendance of our students to ensure that social distancing takes place, in the classrooms, in the cafeterias, and so forth. So that was very important for us to know. So, we kind of understood their rationale. But there are other things that, they are able to do that we don't necessarily have the resources to do. So they talked about the buses, and we said, hey, how do you do contact tracing on their buses? And they said, well, we have cameras in all our buses. I said, well, wow, okay. Yeah, we got cameras. Or would you guys have cameras? No, we don't have cameras. So,
and
they have a lot of support there from other resources, of course, with public health side as well. So
we have some board members coming on in January, around the time that you're hoping to re-implement face-to-face. Are they abreast of everything, of your plans? Are you expecting any sort of opposition to what you plan on doing or what you're trying to do?
Yeah, we have. So there are about, I believe we have 3 new members who have been elected. So, I think they just recently we're trying to get, I think we were waiting for their official certification, but we will be briefing them as we head into this final 2 weeks on getting an update, on where we are with the reopening, especially if we are going to open face-to-face. So, every Friday we have public briefings for the board where we update the board on where things stand. December 15th is going to be the opportunity for the board and to concur with our recommendations. And then if there is a face-to-face decision and that we do see some of face-to-face returning in January, those weeks after December 15th will be very intense. And we certainly will make sure that our new board members are brought up to speed. At this point, we were kind of waiting. There was a final recount that had to happen, I guess, after the congressional election. Actually, I guess our 6th and 7th candidates for the board had to have a recount So we wanted to make sure that before we did anything official, we certified who those members were. And then, so I got confirmation yesterday that all of that's taken care of. So we will be bringing them up to speed and make sure they're ready to go if they have any questions or concerns.
All right. John, I know you got to go because you got that hearing. Bree, you good?
Yeah, I mean, if you have time, I just wanted to follow up on the AG opinion or respond to what the board had tasked you to do regarding the education supervisory financial.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that. Apparently some of that controversy and noise has kind of died down during the last few months, which I think most everybody's kind of been focused in on COVID-19, and so those issues that had come up before. For some reason, the last few meetings have gone really well. So it kind of fell off my radar for a little bit because, it seems like things are moving smoothly. Our biggest concerns right now, in addition to the COVID-19, that's our top, priority is determining whether face-to-face reopening is going to happen or not, because we know that the public, our community wants to know. I think the second issue is that we're doing well on the technology outreach. We know our elementary school students are asking for their turn. And so we're looking at accelerating the ability to get the laptops into the elementary school students' hands. Apparently, when we opened the doors and said, okay, if the secondary school students are not going to pick these up, and then, elementary school students go ahead and sign up. And we got a good rush of applications coming in from that side. So that's good news. And I think we're steps away. I'm hoping by Friday with the Lieutenant Governor, we'll be able to do something more formal around the internet services, update for the households. So all of that we're looking to make sure are in place, when we come back in January for our distance learners. The other big major piece that we're tracking right now, this is around our high risk situation, is of course looking at the transition at US DOE. And so, that's one thing our board's been asking us, don't lose sight of that. And we're certainly not losing sight of it, but there's going to be a lot of changes that typically happen during a transition. My understanding is that USDOE has been going through a lot of restructuring anyway. So they restructured, they moved. They had a separate building for certain offices that they're now consolidating into one building, and they're doing this all at the same time as they're now preparing for a transition to a new administration. So we're just trying to keep up with all the changes. Apparently there are people retiring now, I guess end of the term, people are making decisions about whether to stay with the agency or not. So we're just keeping our eye on the people we've been working with, and, we're making sure we don't get lost in the shuffle. And hopefully when we come back in January, we'll be able to again put Guam back on the radar and let them know, to pay attention to us and make sure that we don't get left behind. So that's on our federal side. At the same time, we're going through all of this, and of course, we hope that Congress and the president, whether it's this president or whether it's the president-elect, will come to some type of agreement within the next month or few months on the stimulus package. And there's a lot of talk about investing in education. And so we're hoping that does come through, especially during these tight times and heading into our new budget season. So we'll all be wishing for that. Oh, and then finally, just in the spirit of, the holiday season, I know that, with Giving Tuesday and just the deep need in the community during this really difficult time, where we know that so many people have had their jobs and livelihoods and incomes affected. We know we're not able to do the same things that we've done in the past. But I know our team was just talking about what we can do in this time frame to continue to support, groups like Catholic Charities with continued food supports. We know we're looking at working with public health to reach some of those areas we talked about where our kids are just not connected to school. And even if we can't do home visits, can we push food and school supplies out to those parts of the community? The DPW, we're working with DPW to see if we can actually have them drop some of the stuff at the bus stops, near those areas, and just find ways to get that support out to the community. And then in January, we normally do a wish list, kind of an after holiday type of outreach from our central office folks who were just, in the spirit of continued giving of really adopted families that we can support. And I'm telling them that we can't do the same thing with home visits and, that type of personal interaction maybe. but we can find a way to just continue those efforts, and hopefully just that keep that spirit of giving going during this difficult time.
Thank
Well,
you, John.
thanks, John.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, good
Appreciate it.
luck
We'll
at
see
your
you guys.
hearing. Break a leg.
Thanks. See you
Okay.
guys.
See ya. 8:47. Let's just keep it in the KUAM Newsroom.